48 hours left. Maria Rodriguez's children are about to be taken into foster care. This mother, who has been struggling on Philadelphia streets for 2 years, is running out of time. But Maria has a plan, and this plan could be a beacon of hope, not just for her own family, but for all homeless families in the city. Could this miracle story unfolding in the shadow of Independence Hall hold the solution to America's biggest social problem? Hello, I'm here with you on Street Unheard channel. Today I'm going to tell you an incredible story that took place in Independence Park, the heart of Philadelphia. How did a mother's fight for her children change an entire city? And why could the critical decision to be made within 48 hours affect thousands of families? This is not just a story of survival, but a testament to the human spirit's ability to transform despair into hope, and how one person's courage can create ripples that change an entire community. Maria Rodriguez, 38 years old, mother of 3 children, 8-year-old Sophia, 6-year-old Miguel, and 4-year-old Diego. But just 3 years ago, Maria's life was completely different. She was an experienced nurse working at Philadelphia General Hospital. She worked 12 hours a day, saving lives, earning the respect of doctors and patients alike. Maria had dedicated 15 years of her life to healthcare, starting as a nursing assistant and working her way up to become one of the most trusted nurses in the cardiac unit. In 2019, Maria's salary was $4,200 per month. They lived in a beautiful 3-bedroom house in the Fishtown neighborhood, a trendy area that had undergone significant gentrification. The children attended St. Bartholomew Elementary School, a private Catholic institution where Sophia excelled in mathematics and Miguel showed promise in art. Diego, the youngest, was just starting to walk and say his first words. Everything was perfect until that dark day came. The Rodriguez family had dreams. Carlos was studying for his contractor's license in the evenings, hoping to start his own construction company. Maria was considering going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. They had a small savings account with $8,000, and they were planning to buy a second car. Family barbecues on Sundays, weekend trips to the Jersey Shore, Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Their life was the embodiment of the American dream. In March 2022, Maria's husband Carlos lost his life in a traffic accident on I-95 just outside the city. It was a Tuesday morning, and Carlos was heading to a construction site in Delaware County. A drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into Carlos's pickup truck. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Maria received the call while she was administering medication to a patient in the ICU. The world stopped. The very place where she saved lives became the place where she learned her own life had been shattered. Carlos was a construction worker, the family's sole breadwinner. He brought home $3,800 per month, working for Davidson Construction, a mid-sized company that specialized in residential developments. Carlos had been with the company for 8 years, and his boss, Tom Davidson, had promised him a foreman position by the end of 2022. Suddenly, Maria was left alone, not just emotionally, but financially responsible for everything. The funeral expenses alone cost $12,000. Their small savings evaporated. Carlos had a life insurance policy through his employer, but it only covered $25,000, barely enough to pay off his truck loan and credit card debts. Maria was left with a mortgage payment of $1,800 per month, utility bills averaging $300, and the children's school tuition of $850 per month for all 3 kids. But the real disaster started later. After Carlos's death, Maria fell into severe depression. She couldn't sleep, barely ate, and found herself breaking down at work. Her colleagues noticed the change immediately. Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of the cardiac unit, tried to help by reducing Maria's patient load and suggesting counseling. But Maria was drowning in grief, and couldn't accept help. Her work performance declined dramatically. She began making mistakes, forgetting to administer medications on time, mixing up patient charts, and once terrifyingly nearly giving a patient the wrong blood type during a transfusion. The hospital's policy was clear: patient safety came first. Her supervisors warned her multiple times, offering employee assistance programs and mental health resources. But Maria was too proud and too broken to accept help. 6 months later, in September 2022, she was terminated. The decision was made by the hospital's board after Maria had missed 17 days of work in August alone. Dr. Williams fought for her, arguing that Maria was dealing with trauma and deserved more support. But the hospital couldn't risk patient safety. Maria was given a severance package of 2 weeks' pay, $2,100, and asked to leave immediately. House mortgage, car loan, children's school expenses, groceries, medical insurance. Everything fell on Maria's shoulders. Without Carlos's income, and now without her own salary, the financial pressure became unbearable. She applied for unemployment benefits, which provided $1,200 per month, but it wasn't nearly enough. She began applying for jobs, but her termination from the hospital made it difficult to find another nursing position. Their savings ran out in 2 months. By November 2022, Maria was behind on mortgage payments. She tried to negotiate with the bank, applied for mortgage assistance programs, and even considered selling the house. But the housing market had shifted, and their house was now worth less than what they owed. The children had to be withdrawn from private school and enrolled in the local public school, North Elementary, which was overcrowded and underfunded. The house was foreclosed in January 2023. 24 hours notice to vacate. Maria packed their belongings into garbage bags and suitcases, not knowing where they would go. They sold their furniture to a second-hand store for $800. The family car, a 2018 Honda Accord, was repossessed the same week. Maria kept only what they could carry. At the beginning of 2023, Maria and her children were left on the street. In Philadelphia's cold winter months, with temperatures dropping to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 people began searching for shelter. The first night was the hardest. They had nowhere to go, no relatives in the area, and no friends who could take in a family of 4. They spent their first nights in the park at Penn's Landing, along the Delaware River. The wind was brutal, cutting through their inadequate clothing. Maria had managed to buy a small camping tent from a thrift store for $35, but it was designed for 1 person, not 4. They huddled together, sharing 2 thin blankets that Maria had saved from their old home. Sophia was crying constantly those first weeks. "Mom, when are we going home?" she asked every night. "When can I see my room again? Where are my toys?" Maria didn't know what to answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that there is no home to go back to, that the toys are gone forever, that everything they knew has disappeared? Miguel, sensitive and artistic, stopped talking almost entirely. He had been an outgoing child who loved to draw and tell stories. Now he sat silently, staring at the ground, occasionally asking when his father was coming back. The trauma of losing his father and his home simultaneously was too much for his young mind to process. Little Diego, only 4 years old, didn't fully understand what was happening. He kept asking for his bed, his stuffed animals, his favorite blanket. Maria had managed to save 1 small toy car for him, but it wasn't enough to comfort a confused and frightened child. The situation of homeless families in Philadelphia is devastating. According to 2024 data from the Coalition for the Homeless, there are 4,600 homeless individuals in the city. 1,200 of them are children under 18. The city has only 847 emergency shelter beds, and family shelters can accommodate just 156 families at any given time. Maria and her children were lost within this overwhelming statistic, just Another family among thousands waiting for help that might never come. Shelters were always full, with waiting lists stretching for months. The average waiting time for family shelter in Philadelphia is 45 days, but in reality, many families wait much longer. Maria registered at Prevention Point Philadelphia, Project Home, and Bethesda Project, but they all told her the same thing: we'll call you when something opens up. The city's rapid rehousing program had a wait list of over 800 families. Maria and her children were given a caseworker, Janet Morrison, an overwhelmed social worker managing 127 cases simultaneously. Janet was kind but realistic. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I wish I could help you faster, but the system is broken. We have too many people and not enough resources. Keep checking in and try to stay safe." Their daily lives had turned into a constant struggle for survival. Maria had to wake up at 5 a.m. every day to prepare the children for school. But where would they wash? Where would they find clean clothes? How could she maintain the illusion that everything was normal when nothing was normal anymore? Maria found a solution at McDonald's and Starbucks locations around the city. They used their restrooms for basic hygiene, washing their faces and hands with paper towels and soap from dispensers. Maria carried a backpack with clean clothes for the children, changing them in bathroom stalls. She learned the schedules of different locations, knowing which ones opened earliest and which managers were sympathetic. The morning routine became a military operation. Wake up at 5 a.m., pack the tent and belongings, walk to the nearest McDonald's by 6 a.m., clean up the children, change their clothes, and get them to school by 8 a.m. After school, they would spend time at the public library, where it was warm and safe, and where Maria could use the computers to apply for jobs and housing assistance. Sophia's classmates began questioning her. "Why do you always wear the same 3 outfits? We've never seen your house. Why can't we come over? Your mom looks sad all the time. Is something wrong?" Sophia learned to lie, making up stories about their house being renovated or their address being temporary. But children are perceptive, and her classmates sensed something was wrong. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed changes in Sophia's behavior and academic performance. The bright, enthusiastic girl had become withdrawn and anxious. Her grades dropped from A's to C's. She fell asleep in class frequently and often seemed hungry. Mrs. Henderson called Maria for a conference, offering resources through the school's social worker, but Maria was too ashamed to admit their situation. Miguel was affected even worse. His performance at school declined dramatically. He went from being an eager student who loved art class to a silent, troubled child who refused to participate in activities. His teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, no relation, called Maria multiple times. "There's a serious change in Miguel. Has something traumatic happened at home? He used to be so creative and talkative. Now he barely speaks." Miguel had also started wetting the bed, something he hadn't done since he was 3. But they didn't have a bed. They had sleeping bags on the cold ground. The embarrassment was overwhelming for him. He began having nightmares about his father and would wake up screaming, drawing unwanted attention to their tent. Maria tried to hide the truth from the teachers and school administrators, but it was getting harder. The children were showing clear signs of trauma and instability. The school nurse, Patricia Collins, noticed that all 3 children were frequently hungry and tired. She began keeping granola bars and juice boxes in her office, quietly providing snacks without asking questions. By the spring of 2024, they had been homeless for over a year. Maria had applied for over 200 jobs, nursing positions, retail work, restaurant jobs, cleaning services. Some employers were interested until they asked for an address and saw that Maria listed a P.O. box. Others were concerned about her gap in employment and the circumstances of her termination from the hospital. She finally found part-time work at a grocery store Acme Markets, stocking shelves for $12 per hour, 25 hours per week. It provided $300 weekly, barely enough for food and basic necessities. She couldn't afford to rent even a studio apartment, which in Philadelphia averaged $1,200 per month. The math simply didn't work. $1,200 monthly income couldn't cover $1,200 rent, plus utilities, plus food, plus transportation. In May 2024, there was a turning point in Maria's life. After spending over a year moving between different parks and safe areas around the city, she made a bold decision. She decided to set up their tent in Independence Park, right in the heart of Philadelphia's historic district. It was a risky move because it was so visible, but it was also safer because it was a heavily patrolled tourist area. Independence Park, home to the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, receives over 5 million visitors annually. The area is well-lit, well-maintained, and monitored by both city police and National Park Service rangers. For Maria, it represented a trade-off: visibility for safety. But this decision made her family conspicuous in a way they had never been before. Every day, thousands of tourists passed through this park, taking photos of historic landmarks, participating in guided tours, visiting the gift shops. They saw Maria's tent, her children doing homework on park benches, their belongings organized in neat piles. At first, Maria was uncomfortable. People's stares, pointing fingers, hushed conversations. She felt like an exhibit in a museum. Some tourists were cruel. She overheard comments like, "Why don't they just get jobs? And this is what's wrong with America." A few even took photos of her family without permission, treating their situation as a tourist attraction of urban decay. Maria felt dehumanized, reduced to a symbol rather than recognized as a person with dreams and dignity. But then she noticed something unexpected. Not all tourists were judgmental. Many approached with genuine concern and curiosity. A family from Iowa asked, "Is there anything we can do to help? Do your children need food?" A couple from Germany wanted to understand. "We heard America had strong social programs. Why isn't your government helping you?" These interactions planted a seed in Maria's mind. These tourists weren't just visiting Philadelphia for its historical significance. They were curious about the real city, the modern challenges, the human stories behind the statistics. They wanted to understand how homelessness could exist alongside such wealth and historical grandeur. One particularly meaningful encounter happened with Anna Larson, a 32-year-old journalist from Stockholm who was visiting Philadelphia with a group of Swedish tourists. Anna approached Maria not as a spectacle to observe, but as a person with a story to tell. She sat down on the bench next to Maria and simply said, "Would you be willing to share what brought you here? I'm trying to understand." Maria found herself telling Anna everything: Carlos's death, the depression, losing her job, the foreclosure, the impossible choice between rent and food. Anna listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and treated Maria with the dignity she hadn't felt in months. When Anna left, she said something that stuck with Maria: "Your story matters. People need to hear it." That night, as Maria tucked her children into their sleeping bags in the small tent, an idea began forming. What if she could formalize these conversations? What if tourists who wanted to understand the real Philadelphia could hear directly from people living these experiences? What if her family's tragedy could become a bridge between privilege and poverty, between tourists and locals, between perception and reality? But she had only 48 hours to turn this idea into reality, because Philadelphia Social Services Department had given Maria a final ultimatum. Janet Morrison, her caseworker, delivered the news with obvious reluctance. "Maria, I've been fighting for you for over a year, but my supervisor is requiring action. If you can't provide proof of stable housing within 48 hours, I'm legally required to begin proceedings to place Sophia, Miguel, and Diego in foster care. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Foster care meant her children would be separated. There were no foster families willing or able to take 3 children together. Sofia might go to one family in the suburbs, Miguel to another family across the city, and Diego to a third family. They might see each other once a month for supervised visits. The family that had already lost so much would be completely destroyed. Maria's plan was born from desperation, but rooted in hope, to organize a real Philadelphia tour, using her location in Independence Park. She would leverage her family's visibility and the tourists' curiosity to create something meaningful, guided conversations about homelessness, poverty, and survival in America. Tourists would pay for authentic stories, and homeless families would earn money while maintaining their dignity. The concept was revolutionary for Philadelphia. While other cities had slum tours or poverty tours that exploited vulnerable communities, Maria envisioned something collaborative, a program where homeless individuals would be partners, not subjects, in telling their stories. First step, building a coalition with other homeless families around the park. Maria had observed that Independence Park and the surrounding historic district housed approximately 15 homeless individuals and families. Each had fallen to the streets through different circumstances: job loss, medical bankruptcy, domestic violence, aging out of foster care, addiction, mental illness. She approached David Wilson first, 45 years old, former high school history teacher, living with his 12-year-old daughter Emma and 9-year-old son Marcus. David had taught at Benjamin Franklin High School for 18 years before budget cuts eliminated his position in June 2023. At 45, he was considered too old by many employers and too young for retirement. His unemployment benefits had run out, and despite having a master's degree in education, he couldn't find work that paid enough to support 2 children. "Maria, this idea is crazy," David said when she explained her plan. "Tourists paying to hear our sob stories? It sounds exploitative." But as Maria explained her vision, dignity, partnership, mutual benefit, David began to see the possibility. "You know what? I've been invisible for so long. Maybe being seen is exactly what we need. And if it helps us earn money while educating people, count me in." The second person she approached was Sarah Chun, 35 years old, former graphic designer, raising her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Sarah's story was heartbreaking. Her husband, Kevin, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in 2021. Despite having health insurance through Sarah's employer, the experimental treatments and medications cost over $150,000 out of pocket. They mortgaged their house, emptied their savings, and sold everything valuable. Kevin died in March 2023, leaving Sarah with overwhelming medical debt and no way to pay the mortgage. Tourist tours? Doesn't this mean people will see us like animals in a zoo? Sarah asked initially. She was particularly sensitive about exploitation because she had worked in marketing and understood how stories could be manipulated. Maria spent an hour explaining her vision. "Sarah, this isn't about people gawking at us. This is about education, understanding, and creating change. When people see our faces and hear our stories, we stop being statistics and become human beings. When they go home to Sweden or Germany or wherever, they'll remember us. They'll vote differently, donate differently, think differently about homelessness." Sarah was convinced. "Okay, let's try. But we control our own narratives. We tell our stories our way." The third family was the Johnsons, Patricia, 41, and her 3 teenage sons, Jerome, 16, Malik, 14, and Dion, 12. Patricia had worked as a home health aide for elderly patients for 12 years until the COVID-19 pandemic eliminated most of her clients. With 3 growing boys and no steady income, they fell behind on rent and were evicted in January 2024. Patricia was proud and initially resistant to the idea. I don't want strangers pitying us. Patricia said firmly, "We're not here by choice, and we're not entertainment." Maria understood Patricia's pride because she felt the same way. This isn't about pity. It's about truth. These tourists see Independence Hall and think about American freedom and opportunity, but they don't see American struggle and inequality. We can show them both sides of the American story. Gradually, Patricia warmed to the idea, especially when Maria explained the financial component. If we can each earn $50 to $100 per day just by talking to people, that's more than I made at some of my jobs. Second step, creating an online presence and reaching potential tour groups. This is where Jennifer Thompson became crucial. Jennifer had been Maria's friend since nursing school 15 years earlier. They had lost touch after Carlos's death, partly because Maria was too proud to ask for help, and partly because Jennifer didn't know how to help. Jennifer worked as a social media manager for a nonprofit organization and had built a substantial following on Instagram. 18,000 followers interested in social justice and community issues. When Maria reached out and explained her situation and her plan, Jennifer was immediate in her support. "Maria, I can't believe you've been struggling like this alone. But this idea is brilliant. Let me help you build this platform," Jennifer said during their emotional reunion at a Center City coffee shop. Jennifer created an Instagram account called Real Philadelphia Stories and began posting about Maria's family and the upcoming tours. She used her marketing skills to craft compelling posts that humanized the participants while respecting their dignity. The first post, featuring Maria's photo and a brief version of her story, received 500 likes and 75 comments within 6 hours. Third step, approaching Philadelphia tourism companies with a formal proposal. Philadelphia's tourism industry generates $7.4 billion annually and employs over 97,000 people. The city hosts approximately 42 million visitors per year. Maria researched the major tour companies, Big Bus Tours, Philadelphia Trolley Works, Urban Adventures, and dozens of smaller operators. Maria spent her precious time visiting tour company offices, calling phone numbers, and sending emails. Her proposal was simple but powerful. Integrate 30-minute Real Philadelphia segments into existing historical tours. Instead of ending tours at the Liberty Bell, extend them to include conversations with homeless families who could provide contemporary context to American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first 5 companies rejected the idea immediately. "Too controversial," said one manager. "Our customers want feel-good history, not depressing current events," said another. "Insurance liability," said a third. "What if something goes wrong? What if these people are dangerous or unstable?" The rejection was disheartening, but Maria persisted. She refined her pitch, emphasizing the educational value, the unique selling proposition, and the positive reviews similar programs had received in other cities. She researched precedents, the favela tours in Rio de Janeiro, the township tours in Cape Town, the reality tours in Mumbai. The breakthrough came with Real Philadelphia Tours, a smaller company owned by Michael Roberts, a 38-year-old former social worker, who had started the business 3 years earlier with a focus on inclusive, authentic city experiences. Michael's company already offered tours focusing on Philadelphia's civil rights history, its immigrant communities, and its modern challenges. "Maria, this aligns perfectly with our mission," Michael said after hearing her full presentation. "We've been looking for ways to address contemporary social issues while respecting the people affected by them. Your approach, giving voice and agency to homeless individuals rather than talking about them, is exactly what responsible tourism should look like." Michael agreed to pilot the program with his existing customer base. His typical tours served 15 to 25 people daily, with customers paying $35 per person for 2-hour experiences. he proposed adding a $15 supplement for the Real Stories component, with $10 going directly to the participating families and $5 covering the company's additional costs and insurance. Tomorrow I have a group of 18 Swedish tourists scheduled for a morning tour. They specifically requested authentic cultural experiences. Would you be ready to launch tomorrow? Michael asked. Maria felt a mixture of excitement and terror. In less than 24 hours, she would either begin earning money that could save her family, or she would embarrass herself in front of strangers while her children faced removal to foster care. That night was the longest of Maria's life. She couldn't sleep, constantly reviewing what she would say, how she would present her family's story, whether the tourists would be respectful or judgmental. She had never spoken publicly about their situation beyond brief conversations with individual tourists. She spent hours writing notes, trying to structure their story in a way that would be informative and impactful without being self-pitying or manipulative. How do you explain 2 years of struggle in 30 minutes? How do you help people understand the complexity of homelessness, the bureaucracy, the daily survival challenges, the emotional toll on children, the way poverty strips away dignity? Children, tomorrow is a very important day, Maria explained to Sofia, Miguel, and Diego as they prepared for sleep in their tent. Some visitors from Sweden are coming to learn about our city and our lives. We're going to tell them our story and answer their questions. If this goes well, it might help us get our own home again. Sofia, now 8 and wise beyond her years, asked the question that kept Maria awake. Mom, what if they think we're lying? What if they don't believe that we used to have a real house and you used to save people's lives? What if they think we're just lazy people who don't want to work? Maria hugged her daughter tightly. Sweetheart, we'll tell them the truth, and the truth is powerful. We'll show them that homeless people aren't different from anyone else. We're just people who had bad things happen to us. And maybe when they understand that, they'll help make things better for other families like us. Miguel, still processing his father's death and their changed circumstances, added, Mom, I'm scared. What if saying we live in a tent makes the other kids at school make fun of us even more? Miguel, there's nothing shameful about surviving difficult times. We're not going to hide anymore. We're going to be proud of how strong we've been and how we've taken care of each other, Maria reassured him. Little Diego, who had adapted to their nomadic life with the resilience of childhood, simply asked, Will the people from Sweden bring us toys? Maria smiled despite her anxiety. I don't know, baby, but they're bringing us something even better. They're bringing us a chance to tell our story and maybe change our lives. At 10 a.m. sharp, Michael Roberts arrived at Independence Park with his group of Swedish tourists. 18 people, ranging in age from 22 to 67, mostly professionals and retirees interested in cultural exchange and social issues. They had specifically chosen Real Philadelphia tours because they wanted authentic experiences beyond typical tourist attractions. The group leader was Anna Larson, the same journalist who had spoken with Maria weeks earlier. Anna had recommended Michael's company to her travel group and had specifically requested the new Real Stories component when she learned about it online. When Maria first greeted the tourists, extending her hand with nervous confidence, she felt the weight of everything she had lost and everything she hoped to regain. Hello, I'm Maria Rodriguez. Welcome to Philadelphia. I'm honored to share my family's story with you today. Anna stepped forward with a warm smile. Maria, some of us met you briefly a few weeks ago. We've been thinking about you and hoping for this opportunity to learn more. Please, tell us everything you're comfortable sharing. For the next 45 minutes, Maria told their complete story. She spoke about Carlos's death, her depression and job loss, the foreclosure, their struggle to survive on the streets. But she also spoke about resilience, about the kindness of strangers, about her children's strength, about the failures and occasional successes of social systems. The Swedish tourists asked thoughtful, respectful questions. What would have prevented your family from becoming homeless? What do you want people in other countries to know about American poverty? How can tourists like us help without being intrusive or condescending? David Wilson shared his story of going from respected teacher to unemployed father, explaining how education budget cuts affect not just students, but entire families. Sarah Chun talked about medical bankruptcy and the impossible choice between saving a loved one's life and maintaining financial stability. What happened at the end of the tour exceeded Maria's most optimistic expectations. Anna Larson addressed her group in English so the families could understand. Friends, we came to Philadelphia to learn about American history and culture. What we've learned today is more valuable than any museum exhibit. These families represent the gap between American ideals and American reality. We need to respond, not just with sympathy, but with action. The Swedish group immediately collected money among themselves, $2,500 in cash and travelers' checks. But more importantly, they committed to sharing these stories when they returned to Sweden. Anna, leveraging her journalism background and social media skills, immediately posted about the experience on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Her posts included photos with permission, quotes from the families, and information about the new tour program. Within 2 hours, her posts had been shared over 1,000 times. But the real breakthrough came that afternoon, when Philadelphia Channel 6 News contacted Michael Roberts after seeing the social media buzz. Reporter Jessica Martinez wanted to do a story about the innovative tour program and its participants. The live television interview took place at 5 p.m. during the station's highest-rated newscast. Maria, flanked by David and Sarah, told their stories to an audience of 250,000 Philadelphia area viewers. The segment was titled From Invisible to Visible. Homeless families share their stories with tourists. The interview was powerful because it humanized homelessness in a way that statistics and policy discussions couldn't. Viewers saw articulate, dignified people who could be their neighbors, their former colleagues, their own family members facing unexpected tragedies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The television station's phone lines were flooded with calls from viewers wanting to help. 3 different churches offered temporary housing. 2 restaurants offered part-time employment. A local apartment owner offered reduced rent housing. Most significantly, Philadelphia City Council member Helen Jim's office called that evening. Ms. Rodriguez, the councilwoman, was moved by your interview and your innovative approach to addressing homelessness. She'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss expanding this program citywide. But the call that changed everything came from Dr. Elizabeth Foster, Chief Nursing Officer at Philadelphia General Hospital. Maria, I watched your interview tonight. I was your supervisor when you were struggling after Carlos's death, and I've regretted how we handled your termination ever since. You were dealing with trauma, and we should have provided better support. Would you consider returning to nursing? We've developed new employee assistance programs, and we need experienced nurses who understand adversity. Maria was speechless. The job that had been taken from her during her darkest hour was being offered back when she had found the strength to rebuild. Dr. Foster, I made serious mistakes. Patient safety was compromised because I couldn't cope with my grief. Maria, you made mistakes because you were human and hurting, and we failed to help you properly. What I saw tonight was someone who has found incredible strength and leadership. The way you've organized these families, created this program, maintained your dignity while facing homelessness. That's exactly the kind of person we need in healthcare. That evening, Maria sat with her children in their tent for what would be the last time. Tomorrow, everything changes, she told them. Mom has a job again. We're going to have our own apartment again. But most importantly, we're going to help other families who are going through what we went through. Sophia, wise beyond her years, asked, Mom, are we going to forget about living here? Are we going to become like the people who used to walk past us without seeing us? Never, Maria promised. We're going to remember every single day, and we're going to use what we learned to help other people. 6 months later, Maria Rodriguez and her children lived in a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Northern Liberties. Maria had been promoted to shift supervisor at Philadelphia General Hospital, earning $5,200 per month. Sophia was back to earning A's in school and had joined the student council. Miguel had rediscovered his love of art and was taking painting classes at a community center. Diego was thriving in pre-kindergarten and barely remembered their time in the tent, but Maria never forgot Independence Park. Every Saturday, she returned as a volunteer coordinator for the expanded Real Philadelphia Stories program. The city had officially adopted the initiative, creating a nonprofit organization that employed 47 formerly homeless individuals as tour guides and storytellers. The program now served 400 tourists per month, generating over $25,000 monthly in direct payments to participants. More importantly, it had changed how Philadelphia addressed homelessness, shifting from a charity model to an empowerment model that recognized homeless individuals as experts on their own experiences. David Wilson had returned to teaching at a charter school that specifically recruited formerly homeless parents as staff members. Sarah Chen had started her own graphic design business, specializing in nonprofit organizations. Patricia Johnson had completed a certified nursing assistant program and was working toward becoming a registered nurse. The Philadelphia model had attracted attention from cities across America and internationally. Anna Larsson's articles in Swedish newspapers had led to similar programs being developed in Stockholm and Copenhagen. Social work students from universities across the United States came to Philadelphia to study the program. But the most important change was in how Philadelphia talked about homelessness. Instead of being an invisible problem discussed in statistics and policy papers, homelessness became a visible, human issue that the city's 1.6 million residents confronted directly. Tourism revenue in the historic district increased by 12% as visitors specifically sought out authentic, socially conscious experiences. The National Park Service, initially skeptical of the program, became a partner, integrating discussions of contemporary poverty into their historical presentations. Maria's story spread beyond Philadelphia. She was invited to speak at the National Coalition for the Homeless annual conference at social work schools and at city council meetings in other municipalities considering similar programs. But for Maria, the most meaningful moment came exactly 1 year after her first tourist tour, when a new family arrived at Independence Park, a mother with 2 children who had just been evicted from their apartment. Maria approached the family with blankets, food, and information about resources. But most importantly, she offered something she hadn't received during her darkest days: hope from someone who had survived and thrived. "This isn't the end of your story," Maria told the frightened mother. "This is just a difficult chapter. And tomorrow, we're going to start writing a better one." Today, Maria Rodriguez's story continues to inspire change. The nonprofit organization she helped create has expanded to 5 other cities. Over 300 families have participated in similar programs, with 85% successfully transitioning to permanent housing within 6 months. But perhaps most importantly, Maria's 48 hours of desperation became a lifetime of purpose. She proved that even in America's darkest corners, innovation, dignity, and hope can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Her story reminds us that behind every statistic is a human being, behind every problem is a potential solution, and behind every tragedy is the possibility of triumph. Did this story give you hope? Share your thoughts in the comments, And don't forget to subscribe to Street Unheard for more inspiring stories of resilience and transformation.